Hey, what's up guys? Kind of an update video. A lot of people wanted me to show some examples of these knives that are going to be allowed on airplanes. Okay, so remember the restrictions are the blade cannot be longer than 2.36 inches and no wider than a half an inch at its widest point. Other stipulations are you can't have a locking blade and or fixed blade, okay, where the blades are fixed as opposed to moving, and no molded handles or grips. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit more in detail about this. And I have a bunch of knives here, obviously I'm gonna show as examples. Some of these knives are allowed, some of these knives are not allowed. So first thing to get out of the way is that it doesn't matter how big the handle is, okay? There's no stipulation on handle size. You can have a full grip or full size knife as long as the blade and everything else you know, stays within the guidelines. All right, I have 3 utility knives here, okay? And I'm gonna do a video on utility knives, these 3 specifically in the future, talking about pros and cons, stuff like that. And someone's been patiently awaiting that video, so you know who you are. Thank you very much for being patient. Anyway, a couple of them here, and we'll quickly go over these. First of all, this one here, right off the bat, you can see it is a lockback. It's quite a beefy lockback here. Right off the bat, you know it's not allowed because it's locking, okay? So it shouldn't be an issue whatsoever. But let's say you miss that, or you happen to have one of these where the lock doesn't work, or it doesn't have a lock at all. It's somewhat of a slip joint. The blade itself is too wide, although it's less than, you know, even from the bottom. And even if, let's say that you pull the blade out and they measure the entire length of the blade, it comes close. It's actually over 2.3 inches anyway, but let's say it was under 2.3, and or they accepted the length of this with the knife in this position here, it's still too wide. Okay, it's wider than a half an inch at its widest point, so it's not going to work. All right, that's one of the things I wanted to point out. Is the width is really the biggest concern here, much more so than the length. 2.36 inches is actually not too shabby of a blade. It's actually very useful. 1-inch blades, as most people know, you know, 9/11 attacks, the planes were hijacked with box cutters. All right, I don't know if it's just a standard little slip box cutter or not, but all you need is a 1-inch blade. I believe the restriction for the width to be less than a half an inch is directly related to utility style knives and or box cutters, because you can have a small length, but they're trying to use that width stipulation to take those out of the equation completely. This being a smaller model, this also locks. All right, so right off the bat, it's no good, but even it has a smaller blade, it's still too wide. All right, and its widest point, it's still more than a half inch. All right, so stuff like this is obviously no good. All right, for both of those accounts. The length is fine, but the fact that it locks and the fact that it's too wide, it's not gonna work. And same with this. I just like breaking this out because I love this knife. This is the coolest box cutter you will ever find. Yes, it's a little bell song. Now on this one, well, technically it does lock. So there's your lock right there. Now our lock is, we have a fixed blade, I suppose, according to TSA people. So the blade length and width and stuff isn't even a factor at this point. Let's say you were to take the latch off, which you could, then you'd still have a blade that's too wide for the stipulation. So I'm not really sure who's going to be checking this type of stuff and how stringent they're going to be. Are they literally standing there with rulers? Let's take some other examples here. The first thing I did was I measured my Spyderco bug. All right, now the bug is an interesting knife. All right, as we all know, very useful. Substantial size, even though it appears small, we all know how useful something like this can be. Of course, it's a slip joint. It's non-locking. So let's start measuring it here. Length, of course, is fine. We're only at about 1.25 inches here. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky. The width of the blade. All right, obviously, you would think its widest point would be right here above the choil. All right, we're looking at under a half an inch. My question is, do they end up, I mean, because technically, this is still the blade, right? So if they measure this at the blade's widest point, it's slightly over a half an inch. So does that make this no good? that's my question, is are people like eyeballing these things? Are they really measuring these things? You know, so technically I would say this is fine because the majority of the blade is under 1/2 inch, but if they were to measure it in just the right spot there, it wouldn't be any good. So it's kind of in question. Obviously, uber tiny things like this are totally fine, non-locking, and definitely within the limitation of 1/2 inch and 2.36 on length. Only a little over, about 1¼ inches long and about 1/4 inch wide. So this one particularly is not an issue at all. So you can rock this on a pendant or something, or put this on your keys, that'd be fine. Take a look at this. This is the Gerber Curve. It has a nice little blade in it. Alright, in this case, length is fine, 1.5 inches. Now its widest point is right here, and you can see this is less than 1/2 inch. So this would be pretty good, right? Now, wrong, because this just so happens to lock. Right, so these little things you have to kind of look for. Alright, that's going to be a problem because it's a locking blade. So that's no good. When I'm all done, I'll show you what's good and what's no good. This is interesting. This is a cheapo Chinese gas station knife. Real piece of crap, right? It locks, so it's no good. But let's assume you had something of this size that's very similar that did not have a lock. I'm trying to give you references as far as what the blades look like. Alright, less than 2 inches, so we're fine on length. As far as width, exactly 1/2 inch at its widest point if you're talking about down here. The rest of the blade is under 1/2 inch. Do they measure here? That's really its widest point of the blade. That's still blade, right? It's not sharpened, but it's part of the blade. This is where things get a little bit tricky. This is where I would consider this to be a molded handle. Most synthetics are molded or CNC'd, okay? Most of the time they're not taking, you know, sheets of some type of synthetic material, you know, and hand cutting them or even stamping them out. A lot of times it is CNC, or in this case, this is molded. It's just a piece of crap, you know, Chinese plastic. And it's molded. That's how they make them. That's how they get the little designs in there, the grids, the patterns. So, you know, this is where, when they say molded grips, this is what I'm picturing are knives similar to this, something along these lines. That brings in the question of the Swiss Army knives. These have synthetic molded handles. They pictured this as an example of a knife that would be fine. This is well within the blade limits, okay? The limitations for a blade are not an issue with this particular one. You can see well under 1/2 inch. All right, and as far as length on this, we're under 2 inches, so that shouldn't be a problem, but technically these handle scales are molded grips. So that's kind of confusing as well. This is the #1 knife I thought of when I was talking about this, and even on CNN's website for the article, they picture a SAC Classic. So this is where interpretation and explanation of terminology is really important. Is the guy, you know, TSA worker at security going to say, nope, that's no good, that's molded? Or are they basically just going to look at it and say, yeah, that blade's small enough, it's fine? Are they eyeballing it, or are they really getting serious with this? That's where my question lies. All right, that's where I'm a little bit confused. One of the best options, I think, is the smallest opinel in the opinel line. This one's non-locking. All right, so that's not an issue. Blade is totally within the limits. It's fine for size, 1/4 inch by a little less than 1.5 inches. Very sporty, legal knife. Definitely not molded, and it doesn't lock. So a very, very cool option. Something like this. Of course, this Boker, this does lock, so that takes that out of the equation. But I wanted to give this as an example of something that is wider. You know, this is too wide. It's within its length limits, but it's way too wide. So that's not going to work. Probably one of my most carried keychain knives, by the way. Still carry that sometimes. Leatherman, the Squirt series. This is another great example of a very useful utility blade within the limits. Okay, this is non-locking, as most of you know. Okay, and it's just basically a slip joint. You have a slight back spring pressure that keeps that open, but it's not a lock. and this is well within the size limits. Okay, it's less than a half an inch, and definitely under 2.36 inches. Okay, so this would be an awesome option, and of course, something like this, a lot of us already have. So it's not like we have to purposely buy something small to take on a plane. This is part of your EDC. This is definitely an acceptable blade. All right, and something like this also gives you a substantial handle as opposed to something that's more proportionate. You can get definitely a nice grip on this, and you know you can get these blades nice and sharp. Okay, so this should be more than adequate for most cutting tasks you're going to need in the short duration of your plane trip. Okay, and I'd still feel pretty confident with this as far as a defensive blade. You really don't need more than an inch for a defensive blade. A 1-inch blade will do severe damage if it's razor sharp. Of course, we'd all prefer something bigger. When you're talking about a defensive blade and your life's on the line, yeah, you want that blade to be as big as it can possibly be. If you can have a sword, you'd love to have a sword in that moment, right? But something like this is definitely better than nothing, and it's not to be laughed at. All right, like I said, a box cutter is devastating. You can easily slit someone's throat with a box cutter. You can easily slash, you know, from their collarbone down to their hip and just spread them completely wide open. All right, there's a lot of points in the body. You have a lot of arteries, major veins, all right, that are under the skin, that are towards the surface, definitely less than an inch deep. So it's some serious business if you start studying anatomy and stuff like that, particularly if you get into defense tactics with blades. You're gonna find that you don't need, you know, a 12-inch fighting fixed blade to get the job done. Something small can certainly work as long as it's sharp. Another example, some, you know, random knife, non-locking slip joint, of course has a blade in it, well within the size limitations. Appellation trail, so more likely this came from Lowe's and in one of those packs. A little, you know, little multi-tool for your keys. Something like this would work, that'd be fine. This is a Victorinox Automobile. That's the model here. I did a review on this a long time ago, very cool. A little bit hard to find. This blade, let's check this out. Okay, this will represent the average full-size Victorinox model. At its widest point here, we're fine. We're under a half an inch, or probably exactly a half an inch. Okay, again, if they start measuring down here, well, in this particular case, it's still fine. It's still within a half inch. So that's not an issue. As far as length, well, we're over. This is too long. Okay, this is, you know, 2 3/4 inches. So that's not going to work as far as length, even though it doesn't lock and it's not too wide, it's just too long. All right. Another example is an Imperial Schrade knife. There's 2 blades in here. There's no mention of multi-blades. All right, so if you have a small pen knife and you do have, you know, multiple blades in it, as long as each individual blade, I would assume, is within the size limit. Like for example, this blade is totally fine. Let's check out this one, see if this one's too long. Definitely within the width range. Get that steady. So this is fine, it's 2 inches. All right, so you have 2 blades here that are well within the limits and it's non-locking. However, this is a molded handle. Synthetic, plastic. They get a care. What do they really, see, I'm really confused with the molded handle stipulation. I don't quite understand where they're going with that and or why. You know, so maybe you guys can explain it to me, maybe I'm missing something. This is a really fun one to take on the airline because they're not gonna be able to open it. This is one of those little magician's knife. You can get this, I think, from Bud K, and you can get this from Smoky Mountain Knife Works. But basically, in order to open this knife, you have to hold it upside down, push the blade in, and then the blade will release. Okay. To close this knife, once it's closed, you push the blade in and turn it upside down, and a little piece locks it in here. So you can't open this any other way. So if you hand this to someone, more than likely they're not going to know how to open this. They're going to try to pinch it out. It's never going to work. It has to be upside down, and you push the blade in and then let go, and it retracts. Now this locks closed, but it does not lock open. All right, is this a locking knife? Well, technically it's a locking knife, but it doesn't lock open. It only locks closed. That's a strange thing. The blade size is within limitations here. It's fine. A lot less than a half inch, and it's less than 2 inches, or excuse me, just over 2 inches. So 2.3, this would probably make it just fine. I mean, it's right there. I don't know. It's a locking knife. No one would really know that, except for you. But if nothing else, it'd be fun if they do check the knives. Oh, sir, I need to look at your knife, and just hand it to them and say, knock yourself out. And they're gonna go, what's wrong with this? And, you know, at that point, maybe you can just play dumb, because you don't want to start any trouble. But yeah, I don't know. It raises some questions. And a lot of people said, you know, this is not a big deal. And people asked if this is around the world too. These standards, these rules are, I believe, within the international regulation for carry-on knives like this. You know, the blade limits and stuff like that. This is already set internationally, so it's already law for a lot of different countries. Of course, different airlines might not participate in this, you know, and/or have their own rules, but this will be within international law. Okay. And that's, I believe, why they kind of came up with these specifics to match that. So this one is good, we feel, right? You think that's good? I think so. That one's fine. This is fine. This is good. This is probably one of your best options. Sat Classic, well, if that's considered molded, maybe not, maybe so. I'm gonna say probably fine. That's no good, that's no good. Locking, none of the utility knives, locks, that's no good. Locks, this locks, that's no good. So don't just be, you know, fixated on size here, because, you know, something small right off the bat may not seem like a big deal, but again, if they're going to be sticklers with this thing and they open your knife up and find that it locks, they're going to say, sorry, I can't have that. Right? And you're not going to go find the car at the airport and put it back in your car. They're probably just going to take it. I can tell you the last time I flew, I'm not sure if I told this in a story. This is good too, by the way. And the bug's good. Right? We feel like the bug's good. I don't know if I told this in a story time video or not, but when I flew with my family to Disney, I had a pat down at security because I had my Victorinox Swiss card in my wallet, and I legitimately forgot about it. I've always had knives on me since I was 9, and when I went to I knew, like, even my dad said, look, you can't bring any knives, don't sneak anything on, I don't want to get arrested, I don't want to ruin our trip, don't leave your knives home. And I argue with him. I'm like, you know what? I can totally get away with these. Like, no, we're not playing that game. I'm not ruining my vacation because you want to sneak a knife on a plane. And I said, you know what? Fine, fine. And I left all my crap, but I had my Victorinox Swiss card in my wallet, and I legitimately forgot about it. And I'll never forget it, because when I'm going through security, you know, I put my wallet and my crap in a little bucket, and it's going through, and then it was a woman, and she gave me a funny look, and then she did the little whisper thing into her you know, radio, and then some black guy came over, and they're talking, and they're staring at me, whispering, and I'm thinking, something's wrong. I think I'm in trouble, and I don't know why, because I'm thinking, I know I left all my knives home, like, what's going on here? And then they called over a third guy, which was this massive Hawaiian dude. This guy must have been like 500 pounds, and he waddled over, and now all three of them are whispering and looking at me, and they asked me to step out of the line, and I'm like really getting nervous, like, what's going on? And the woman said, look, you know, we found this in your wallet. It contains a knife. You know, are you trying to sneak this on the plane? What's your motives? And, like, I'm getting the 50 questions going on here. And I'm freaked out. I'm thinking, oh man, I ruined the vacation and everything. And basically, all she said was like, look, you can't have this. So we're going to take it. We're going to be seizing this from you right now. You know, you have to sign this piece of paper. At that point, I'm like, whatever. It's a $10 loss. I just want to get in the plane and go on vacation. So it's not like I was ready to fight it or anything. I was actually more nervous about being in trouble. So it could have been an expensive knife, and at that point, I would just, that's it. It would have been a loss. I'm not going to go, you know, travel, take the tram thing all the way back to our car and parking, long-term parking and all that crap. So it doesn't matter what it was. I was just happy that it was something cheap. But I legitimately forgot about it. And that was basically all that came of it, is they said, you know what? This is ours now. Sign this piece of paper. And I said, all right, and I was on my merry way. But it was a very nerve-wracking moment, and I really had no idea what's going on, and I was legitimately scared of a cavity search. I really thought that that Hawaiian dude's fist was going to be inside me, and I puckered a little. I was sweating, but believe me, the bank vault was shut for business, so you would have had to use a lot of muscle to get in there if that was the case. But I'm glad they didn't have to do that. So yeah, no cavity search for my Swiss card. I don't know what it's gonna be like flying next. I don't know how security's changed. I know it's changed I know that everyone gets a little bit molested and felt up, and you got to do it with no shoes on. And I'm sure there's other things going on that I don't know about, so I will figure that out when I have to fly next. But in the meantime, it's good knowing that at least I can carry this stuff. To be honest, because I can have something small, I'll probably have multiple things on me. I'll carry a Classic, I'll carry my Leatherman Micra, I'll carry Micra and my Squirt. I'll carry a bunch of things. I'll have, this on my keys with me. There's nothing saying you can't have multiple knives on you. It's just, I'll make sure that each one falls under the proper category. So let's say they do want to confiscate this because it's molded. Well, fine. Take my $10 Classic. I will shed one little tear down my cheek, but it's not devastating. I'll have other things on me as well. So, I don't know. I still think it's good. Some people still said, it's not a big deal, and, they're still restricting us and everything. I replied to Gavco, left a comment, thanks for spreading the word and stuff, because he gets emails from Knife Rights, which, by the way, please join Knife Rights. Okay, a lot of people push the NRA. I'm pushing Knife Rights, right up there with Gavco, because it's important. These companies, these entities, they're really doing us a solid for fighting for our rights, and this is something that they're always a part of. But what he had mentioned was he's like me. He feels that although it's a very small step, it's still a step in the right direction. It's still a good thing, so any progress is just that. It's progress. It's good news. So I am very happy about this, but hopefully this video defines a little bit more as to what you may or may not be able to have. Things are still in question. The molded things, it's got me thrown a little bit. I'm not 100% on that. And I'm really not 100% on how stringent they're going to be with these rules. I would imagine that their security will be probably trained to visually determine whether a blade on any kind of tool and or individual knife is going to be allowed. They'll probably look at it and just make sure it doesn't lock, and they'll look at a general size. I really don't think they're going to be breaking out rulers and measuring these things or really busting your hump about it. But who knows? It remains to be seen. So anyway, that's all. After April, when this stuff's in effect, if you happen to fly and post videos on your experiences. Bring stuff like this and see what happens. And if it's good to go, you share it with us. If something gets confiscated, which you didn't feel it should have, let us know. It's important to get the information out there, so everyone's on the same page and everyone knows what the deal is, so they don't have to worry about, their own experiences. They can have a nice, easy, smooth flight and no problems. We all love our gear, even our little $5 and $10 knives. We love them. We don't want to get rid of it, and we certainly don't want the airport taking it from us. So, I think most of us are on the same page. We'll follow the rules. That's fine. We don't want our stuff taken away. Just, be specific. Let us know what we can have, and we'll follow your rules. Just make sure, your rules are clear. So, anyway, that's all. Just an update to this. A lot of people said, hey, come on, man. Can you show us some examples? Someone said, you have a bunch of knives. We know you have a lot of knives. Show us some examples. What are you talking about here? Don't just give me numbers. I want to see some knives, right? So there's your examples. And all else fails, you can get an awesome little set of these. For I think 10 or 15 bucks, you get 4 or 5 of them. And that is definitely okay. I'm fairly sure of it. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good night. Take care.